At the beginning of my spiritual journey, I remember thinking, as I was learning to meditate and trying to learn to have just one thought at a time, how nice it would be to also be able to combine what I considered at that point in time to be all the aspects of myself into one person so that I could be the same person all the time. I hated having to be one person at work and one person at home and one person around my family outside of the home, like when I'd go to gatherings and things, and then one person in public. Like, there were just all these people. It didn't occur to me until well into my spiritual journey that there will always be different aspects of myself, but that I get to choose which ones I show to the world, because we're all multidimensional and we can do that. And while I did reconcile to a certain degree the ability for myself to be who I am everywhere I go, no matter who I am at the time, I'm still always wearing a different pair of shoes. I am a mother. I am a child. I am a wife. I am a friend. I am an employee. I am a healer. I am a podcaster. Welcome back to Going 5D with Destiny Dawn. I'm your host, Destiny Dawn. This is who I choose to be, and the choices that I made in getting there that make me unique and happy. Not which face I showed to the world or my ability to be the same person all of the time. What I was truly wanting to do, or rather needing to understand, was that I needed to honor myself enough to show all of the sides proudly of who I am, so that the world could see who I truly was. But I had to be honest about who that was. And I had to be okay with letting go of those who would reject those aspects of me. And now I have. I wasn't sure in the beginning how it was going to solve my problem. I think it just felt like I was going through this sort of healing and intensive training period. I had even referred to as Spirit University at times. But I kind of knew that going through this was necessary and that I would come out so changed that it would fill up all of the spaces that I shed during the process. I don't know. I felt good about it going in as to what it would look like coming out. And I guess I was open to that process, and it really helped me. It just turned out very different, and I'm glad that I was more open-minded the further that I got in, because you kind of realize that you don't know what questions to ask until you start asking questions. In one sense, that is kind of how it happened too. I'm still me, just minus the negative people that were making me feel uncomfortable about being myself. But it's not like I went and fought with them all, though there were 5 or 6-ish instances where there was a falling out. And there is a reason that at one point my sister had called me combative, which I've joked about a few different times, but I digress. See, in reality, my way of thinking and the defense mechanism that I had used to feel justified about everything that I felt, and why I felt compelled to argue about, the product was the product of my conditioning, the experiences and the traumas that I had accumulated, particularly, during key developmental stages throughout my life, which brings me to 2 very important concepts that I would like to discuss with you today. These are, in psychology, some of the most important, because knowing about these not only helped me, but helps a lot of people really put things into perspective The first being a theory of Erik Erikson, who developed one of the most popular theories in psychology, so much so that it has remained influential enough to still be used to this day. Every psych program starts with Freud, Erikson, and Jung, which I will be discussing, at least Jung. I don't think we need to talk about Freud here. The short version, as far as Erikson goes, is that Erikson believed we go through these stages of development throughout our entire lives. At each stage, we are faced with age-related challenges that we either successfully overcome or we don't and struggle going into the next phase. How well you make it through each stage determines how successful you will be in the next one. So, I'm gonna not go into what all of these are, just listing which ones they are. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I do encourage you to look up Erikson's theory about development. Stage 1 is trust versus mistrust, which is 0 to 18 months. Autonomy versus shame and doubt, which is 18 months to about 3 years old. Initiative versus guilt, which is about 3 years to 5 years. Industry versus inferiority, 6 to 11. Identity versus confusion, 12 to 18. Intimacy versus isolation, 18 to 40. Generativity versus stagnation, 40 to 65. And then integrity versus despair, which is 65 and older. Now, that's just rough, right? We know that sometimes people evolve at different paces, and that's okay. But this is just a guideline. I can look back from my 40s and see where some things went sideways. But I would ultimately course correct and move on, which sounds simpler than it was, and I get that. And for many, it's really not possible to do that. Most people do to some degree. It's just how the next stage is going to look from that point. There's a lot of people that get stuck there too, and then or in other ways, and then aren't able to move on. But if we combine that theory with Carl Jung's theory regarding these archetypes, things start to make a little more sense, which brings us full circle in today's discussion, at least back to where we started. Carl Jung believed in the collective unconscious, which is information stored away in our minds that is genetically passed down to each of us and only unlocked upon reaching a specific situation or stage in our life where we use that information. Known as archetypes, one example would be the role of the mother or the father, known as the caregiver. Other examples include the innocent child, the everyman, the hero, the outlaw, the explorer, the creator, the ruler, the magician, the lover, the jester, and the sage. Now, similarly, tarot actually has a number of archetypes as well. Some of them aren't specifically people, but they are roles you play. For example, the Fool. I'm going to list these pretty much in order, but the Fool, the Magician, the High Priest or Priestess, the Emperor or Empress, the Hierophant, the Lovers, the Chariot, more like the Charioteer, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, Strength, the Hermit, the Wheel of Fortune, Justice, the Hanged Man, Death or Rebirth, Temperance, the Devil, the Tower, the Star, the Moon, the Sun, the World, and Judgment. Considering that most of these, what they refer to as in tarot, major arcana or archetypes, existed at least 1,000 years before Jung was born, it's pretty obvious that, or very likely anyway, that his inspiration came from these. Though it's no surprise considering that the Jungian psychology reaches further into the etheric realms than any of the other founding fathers in the field. My point is, though, I knew about this going into what we have talked about before, referred to as shadow work. So I understood these concepts by my mid-20s because I had learned about them in college. So going into doing shadow work felt an awful lot like self-therapy to me, to be honest. But setting aside that time to meditate while learning Ayurveda really helped me, to trace back some of those painful memories that, while I had somewhat successfully overcome, helped me to realize were actually still affecting me profoundly, and waiting for the day that I could make peace and reconcile them. It is now my belief that not only do we have the power to be whomever we so choose, but that we can change our choices as many times as we want, that we can heal and don't need anyone else to do it, just maybe to help in showing us how, or to be there to support us while we go through it. That's why it's important not to judge where somebody's been or where they're going, because we don't know about their past. And even if we do, we all perceive information in our own special way that we should be allowed to do as we so choose. While I absolutely believe in the developmental stages as theorized by Erikson, I think Jung's theory was missing a layer that probably would not have gone over so well in his time, in that archetypes aren't simply encoded into us from birth, but that we're basically blank slates when we come in. We reach stages in our lives that require the information needed to take on new archetypes, that we learn and refer back to information stored that we have or associated with a role, that we use intuition beyond that, which comes from previous lifetimes and our spirit guides, to confirm, which I believe is yet another example of deja vu, to let us know that we are on the right path, since that's what I believe deja vu really is. Whether or not you choose to heal from your past in order to heal your present is up to you. But I did, because at the realization that I was still hurting, I didn't want to hurt or feel defensive anymore. I didn't want to lose the people that did accept me for who I was. And that's what I was afraid of. Most of the people left in my life accept me for who I am and who I've been throughout my life, as well as who I've become. It is my belief that we are the culmination of all of these archetypes. These shoes that we have had to walk in throughout our lives. Notice I didn't use the analogy regarding faces or masks like many do that we wear. And this is another component of Jung's theory regarding archetypes, in that there are two sides of us at any given time, which also brings us back to the beginning, who we really are, the face that we show versus the face that we show to the world. And as I mentioned earlier, I would rather like to think that I am consistent in who I am all of the time, at least more so these days than before. That said, I've actually taken some quizzes in the past that I wanted to talk about today. I took an online Jungian archetype test, which that one was new. And that one basically ranks your 12 archetypes per his theory, and then breaks them down into yourself, who you really are, versus your persona, which is who you show to the world. You can check this out too by going to psychologistworld.com/Jung quiz. Or you can just do like I did and Google young archetypes. It popped up with quiz, and then I clicked on that, so young archetype quiz would work as well. I actually got 75% match as the innocent child for both myself and my persona. I don't think that happens all the time, but it didn't happen the first time, but I did it twice. I was perfectly fine with the first answer. I just wanted to be consistent. It's funny because the first time I did it, it said innocent child for myself and then Joker for my persona. And I always test the consistency of these kind of tests because if it gave me a wildly different answer, I wouldn't have used it. Apparently, I selected a different answer somewhere. Interestingly, my second time I took it, it came up, of course, the innocent child, but my number 2 was the Joker for both my who I really am and myself and my persona. So I found that really interesting. So the Joker is said to be lighthearted, social, and fun to be around, which I mean, if you're going to have a persona, I mean, that would be the one I'd want to have, considering laughter truly is the best medicine. You know, food is medicine and laughter is medicine. It's great stuff. But the innocent child is very interesting. The innocent child is essentially a person who is naive, but breathes life and creativity in a unique way. And that's kind of what it described as the innocent child. So now, being the innocent child for both myself and my persona is very interesting. I almost felt like it was a little more accurate now that I got to thinking about it, that the Joker was my persona, or not my second, but my persona. But I would be fine either way. In any case, obviously, the results were pretty consistent. They were pretty darn close. I probably just selected a different answer, to be honest. But considering that, you know, my very humble beginnings and countless occasions where things had gone very wrong, you know, all we could do was laugh. I probably do wear the Joker mask at times, and I'm okay with that. Another fun quiz, though. I've done this one several times now. I would also highly recommend taking it. It's 16 Personalities quiz, which is an adaptation of very similar to the Myers-Briggs test, which is used to help understand our personalities. I learned about this one back in nursing school as one of our first assignments, actually. The idea being that understanding our personalities helps us to more effectively interact with one another, and patients. The first time that I took it, this would have been back in 2016, I got the entertainer. Then I took it again in 2020 and 2022, and that time I got the protagonist both times. Again, I like to see about consistency, you know, especially if it changes. I was curious about that, I guess. The last time that I took it, which was actually for this, I tried again and I got the commander. Now, without going too far into detailed and lengthy explanations, it's basically an analysis where you fall in with 4 different personality designations. Either you're extroverted or introverted. There's sensory versus intuitive, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. So just to kind of give you an idea, the entertainer is ESFP. So E for extrovert, S for sensory, F for feeling, and then P for perceiving. The next ones that I got 2 in a row, the protagonist, I got ENFJ, extroverted, This time I got intuitive, which was different, as opposed to sensory. And then F being feeling, and J being judging. Now, the last time, it changed by one letter, which was interesting. It's been interesting to look back on all of these things and correlate them with where I was in my life at the time that I did it. So in this case, the only letter that changed was the F to the T. And that means that I am feeling less and thinking more. When I first took it, I was definitely a people pleaser. So the entertainer makes sense to me. I was trying my hardest to be accepted by everyone. The second and third times, I was doing a job that I felt pretty good about, mostly. While for the first time in my life, finally having the financial freedom to give back to my community and explore who I really was. I learned a lot about that time. And that was before I went into the spiritual journey, because I got to know a lot about, like, what I wanted out of life. And it just eventually, I think, kind of led into the spiritual journey. But after everything came crashing down, and now headed in the direction that I choose to be going, it's honestly no surprise that I got the results I did, which feel like the most accurate representation of who I really am, which just goes to show that stress, trauma, pain, and socioeconomic disparity can truly affect who we are. I believe that with every fiber of my being. If we analyze those personality designations, the first are quite different from the last three. I was extroverted. That's the only one that's the same as now. I wasn't listening to my intuition. I was feeling my way through life, and I was perceiving, not judging. No, I don't think that's a bad thing. None of these are bad things, really. But to me, I feel like I was just going through the motions. Still extroverted to this day. Now I'm following my intuition, but I'm thinking and judging. The only difference, like I said, is the F and the T in the last couple. I'm feeling less and I'm thinking more, which is no surprise now that my head is so much clearer. I feel like I've freed myself, and I would love to help other people feel that way too. So why does this all matter? As discussed in previous episodes, it is my belief that we come here to experience everything we possibly can, as individuated fractals of the divine collective consciousness. From that perspective, knowing there is no such thing as good, bad, or evil, we are no longer victims of circumstance, but creator beings who have complete control of our own destiny. According to Ayurveda, our physical well-being is a direct reflection of our mental and spiritual state. It's well established that you are more likely to experience obesity if you are experiencing mental health issues. And conversely, if you are obese, you are far more likely to experience mental health issues. The same goes for low-income individuals, socioeconomic disparities. This is well understood. People prey on these facts. That said, my goal is not to judge you or to make you feel bad. Quite the opposite. I seek only to empower you, which is why you have come. As mentioned in my very first episode, I do not believe in coincidence, and that if you are here listening to this podcast, there is a reason. While I do highly suggest learning more about your personality types, then maybe even checking out, say, astrocafe.com and have some fun comparing that with your birth chart. I think not only will you learn more about who you are, but why. I think that that's what you can see with the astrological stuff, which we'll talk more at length about later. But it's true, especially after looking at your birth chart. For me, it kind of became clear as to why I chose the path I did. And I believe that your birth chart is essentially like the moment that you came in, based on when that body, that vehicle was going to be ready, and all of the attributes that came with it. It's kind of like a marker. If it doesn't become immediately clear, sit with it for a while. And if it doesn't work, it might not be meant to. But then you know that you have some inner work to do. Still, to release that which no longer serves you is the most important part. That's what I really want you to sit with is, are you at peace with who you are and where you're at? If you can't be, maybe you need some extra help. But if you can, are you able to let go of that no longer serves you in order to process, understand, and then replace all of that with that which does? Are you able to do that? Like I said, there will be some of you who still won't be able to make peace with yourself, others, the past, your pain, or your trauma. There might not be people who are ready to know. But you chose this journey. And sometimes while you aren't supposed to remember, you are now. As individuated conscious fractals of the divine, your existence is no mere coincidence. You are a creator being, God, living a physical incarnation as part of the human collective. I don't actually believe that you're not supposed to ever know. Maybe you weren't until now, and maybe it'll take some effort to get it out, or maybe you just need some help. But I do believe that the time has come, or is coming, for us to remember who we really are now. If you'll do me this courtesy, repeat after me. I am. I am. And I'm here to help you remember that. It was necessary for us to experience the darker side of humanity. And while it may be hard to believe that we are living a happier and freer existence than we have in the last 20,000 years, we are. It's time for you to remember how powerful you are, what you are capable of, and that you deserve a happy existence. Yeah, we're all still here to learn lessons, of course, but we're moving into a direction where we will find and live amongst peace on earth. That's where we're headed. But we have a whole bunch of trauma to work through before we can get to that point. And I believe that this is the time to do it. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. It's a powerful quote spoken by Eleanor Roosevelt, clear back in 1941. These words ring true today, just as much as they did when they were first spoken over 80 years ago. In every generation, the world has faced a number of calamities, believed by many to be a grim future looming in the horizon. I cannot tell you how many times that I've heard my elders utter phrases like, "back in my day," or "kids these days will never understand blank." My favorite, "you gotta watch out for blank these days." The truth is that whether you're young or old, rich or poor, mean or nice, happy or sad, white, black, brown, or any shade in between, you matter. And until we stop perpetuating fear, by living there, we cannot let go of the past, learn from it, take what we need, and move on. We remain stuck there, held by those who benefited from the ugly side of human nature, and those afraid of change, that they are stuck living in the shadows of fear. The truth is that for far too long, we have had someone or something to be afraid of, to keep mankind in its place within an outdated hierarchy that lost its usefulness ages ago. What was once a construct used to assure the needs of all were met, it's evolved into a global pissing contest between genders, religions, races, anything that we can find to bicker about that keeps us divided, all to make ourselves feel superior to someone, anyone. Those who control or have controlled the narratives were not specifically bad people. It's easy for those seeking safety and security to get caught up in that. Just like we've talked about, our archetypes are a combination of who we've been throughout our entire lives. That's become pretty clear. And if you're lacking either money or control or some of the most fundamental things that we need in our lives, which is another psychological theory I could go into, but I'll save you. Knowing that, though, can help us better understand that there are very basic fundamental needs that we as humans need to have met in order to feel safety, security, and comfort. Which would explain why so many of the same families have been in control for so long. Which brings us back to the modern age, the age of Aquarius. We've experienced war. Now it's time to move on. It's time to let the people that served a purpose in keeping us in our place fuck off. Despite the grim forecasts, there are more empowered, successful, and enlightened people alive today than ever, going all the way back to the beginning of recorded history. Imagine looking at the world from the perspective of our ancestors. Say lived 1,000 years ago, 2,000, 5,000 years ago, when people, especially women, were property, when most people lived as peasants, when most people lived in huts or caves because they were peasants, when most people lived in fear of invasion, among a number of other things, when whole groups of people were enslaved, when women were not allowed to speak, when women were seen as inferior, not even allowed to speak for fear of being put to death. The list goes on and on. I can't even wrap my mind around that. I've heard so much about how messed up things were in our distant past, but I've just recently learned, for whatever reason, about how bad it was for women. And I really do believe that. I really do believe that there's been this pissing contest and that, people, men, apparently, were afraid of what women were capable of. Or, God forbid, to be outshined by one. It all goes back to psychology. Keep them down. Now, there's a lot of different things that I can see a purpose for, even religion. But that one, not a fan of. I don't get it. But whatever. I digress. Our modern age has yielded a new generation of innovators, entertainers, athletes, artists, and a number of other professions that have given rise to those with determination, dedication, knowledge, aptitude, charisma, enough to stand out among the rest. Their secret wasn't that they were born ready, that they were born gifted in all these areas. Almost never is it the case that someone is just born with the aptitude to do something. Is that happening more frequently now? Yes. There's a reason for that, though. We are doing things differently from the gate, from when someone's born. People are learning as babies. When I had talked earlier about being born with a clean slate, I believe that we haven't done that a lot until just recently. And I also believe that the genetic encoding is a little bit different, that it's evolving. The point is that they worked hard. They did what they had to do the things that they were passionate about. And we're seeing that more than ever. To rise above their circumstances. They willed it into being through hard work. Or just learning how to play the game, then playing their asses off. They believed that they could and proved it to themselves. I actually saw a cap at my daughter's graduation a few years ago that said she believed that she could, and so she did. And I just love that. Because I believe that if we empower ourselves in that way, we will see results. We have to learn how to be our own cheerleader. And that's a big part of what I'm getting at. We should be encouraging ourselves and each other, because we should do better. We can do better. Instead of focusing on what our differences are, how about we focus on what we're capable of? Those people believed they could, and they proved it to themselves, never stopping until they succeeded. In America, we call that the American dream. But isn't coming up in the world everyone's dream? Success might look different to everyone, but it's not just for Americans. It's not just for wealthy people. Every single person on the planet deserves to be happy, to do what they love, to be safe, to be secure, to own a home, to be loved. You deserve that. Everyone deserves that. So again, repeat after me, because your existence matters. You are here on purpose. You chose to be. Repeat after me. I am. So let's take it easy on ourselves and others. Their journey and their beliefs may not make sense to you or me, but they are no less important. In light of everything that we've discussed today, and up to this point in our podcast, we are going to shift gears a bit. I think that we've covered all of the heavy-hitting stuff that we needed to. I truly hope that you've picked up on a few helpful nuggets, and that you will join me for some lighter topics going forward, now that we're done laying the groundwork. Next time, I'll be discussing dreams, visions, trance, hypnotherapy, what psychology and spirituality say about them, psychedelics, and even share some really far out experiences of mine that I think you will all find very interesting. As always, thank you all so much for joining me today. I really do hope that you have gotten as much out of this as I have. Obviously, it's been cathartic for me to share my journey, but I felt like from the very beginning that at some capacity I was going to be able to help people. And even if it's only one person that I can help, that will matter. It will make it all worth it. But I hope it's more. I hope that you're able to take away some nuggets in every single episode. That's my goal. So, until next time, namaste.